to stop attacking me, for example. Because lots of people do. They do come up to me and say, why have you got a blue badge? You're not disabled.
My name is Comfort Okolo. I'm a retired specialist nurse. Worked with sickle cell and thalassemia in Newham for several years. Sickle cell is a blood disorder passed on to children from both mom and dad directly. When somebody has a sickle cell disorder, they've inherited the unusual hemoglobin S without the usual hemoglobin A. So anybody who has hemoglobin S without an A has a sickle cell disorder, and there are several different sickle cell disorders. I mentioned hemoglobin A, which is the usual hemoglobin type. If somebody has hemoglobin A, that hemoglobin absorbs a lot of oxygen, and the red blood cells that carry the hemoglobin around the body need the red blood cells to stay soft and flexible. When somebody has sickle hemoglobin, which is hemoglobin S, the hemoglobin doesn't carry a lot of oxygen. And when the oxygen content in the red cell is reduced, it collapses and forms the sickle or the banana shape. As well as that, it becomes quite hard and quite sticky. So when they stick together, they jam up the blood vessels and they stop the blood going around the body. And that's what the problem with sickle cell is. If somebody has hemoglobin A and hemoglobin S, the hemoglobin A actually has enough oxygen and the red cell maintains its shape and texture. So somebody can have an AS, which is the sickle cell trait, or can be called a healthy carrier, and never know it until they have a blood test. The important thing there is that any child they have could inherit either the usual hemoglobin A or the hemoglobin S. So if there's hemoglobin S from one parent and anything other than hemoglobin A from the other parent, then that child has a sickle cell disorder. The most common is SS, and on paper the most severe is SS because all the hemoglobin is capable of sickling. SC is another combination. The C in itself doesn't sickle, but unfortunately doesn't stop the sickle cells from sickling. And that's why any combination where there's an S without an A is a sickle cell disorder. I think first and foremost, be aware what your hemoglobin type is. Find out. Don't say because I'm not ill, I'm not unwell, so I don't have it. Or it doesn't happen in my family, because I've known people who it doesn't happen in their family. And men, of course. I'm not being sexist here, but it's usually, it's not in my family. And I told somebody, but you do have a sister. And somebody will tell you your sister is not in his family, and he's talking about your family. And he sort of looked at me, I thought, oh crumbs, I haven't thought about that. But again, it's important that sickle cell trait is not actually an illness, it doesn't affect you, and it's only a blood test that can tell you that you have a sickle cell trait. So be aware what your hemoglobin genotype is. And I think sometimes something we actually do forget is that your blood group is not your hemoglobin type. And people have actually known their blood group, and one of the blood groups is A, and actually thought that was their hemoglobin genotype they were talking about. And that is something that's so very important. Your blood group is not the same thing as your hemoglobin type. Sickle cell is predominant where there's malaria, but because it's genetic, you cannot actually tie it down to any ethnic group. So countries where there's malaria, you find that the sickle cell incidence is higher, but anybody can actually have a sickle cell trait. We don't know how far back, what's happened way back in our generations. And we actually have an example where we had a young man who was very, very good. The sister was pregnant, had AS, and came to us. She didn't believe it. and went and blamed the mother that she doesn't know who the father was, tell me who my father is because I've got sickle cell traits and only black people, have sickle cell traits, and sort of disabused her mind there and just said it's genetic, so it can come from predominantly, yes, people of African, Asian, Mediterranean, but it can be anywhere. So the safest thing, if you're found to have any hemoglobin traits, it doesn't matter what the ethnic origin of your partner is, the safest thing is to actually have a test.
My name is Evelyn Nsia, and I live in Dagenham. I suffer from sickle cell. I think I was about 5 when my parents were told I had sickle cell, because apparently I used to get very sick, and a friend actually asked them to go check if I have it, because they had no idea if they were carriers or not. So it was through me that they got to know they were even carriers. And at my younger ages, I used to be almost always sick, let's say every week, every other week. Now it's a bit better, but I used to get very, very sick, yeah. I became fully aware of my crisis when I was about 8 years, because I remember going into crisis and my dad taking me into hospital. And the doctor, I think they ran a few tests, and the doctor told him he's very sorry, there's not much he could do about it. So my dad should just take me home. Basically, to just go and die. So my dad took me to a different hospital, and they took care of me, and later he came back to the other hospital to tell the doctor I was well. And that was when I remember very well I was sick and I was taken to hospital. But after then, I'd been in crisis almost always. But then I knew about it now, and I knew how to take care of myself. When the doctor told my dad to take me away, it was my dad that told me. I remember being taken into the hospital years ago. But the interesting thing is my dad only told me this about 2 years ago, because the doctor died, and he was telling me about the doctor who had died, and this is what he told him when I wasn't sick, like I was sick then. But I remember not feeling very well in me, my dad taking me there, and then leaving there and going to another hospital. Yeah, and this was back in Ghana. It affects my daily life in different ways. With socializing, it depends on the weather if I can go out or not. I just try to keep myself very warm. I don't do like strenuous exercises. I try to drink lots of fluid. And I carry my painkillers wherever I go, because I never know when I'm going to get into crisis. So initially, whenever I was in crisis, I just wish I wasn't dead, initially. But now, when I'm in crisis, I just pray I get well soon and try not to concentrate on the crisis. I'm an SC sufferer, and due to the crisis, I've lost the vision in my right eye. And the doctors told me, initially I had to go into hospital like every other week to check on the eye. But the doctors had to take me off because they said there wasn't much they could do about it. So if I see any sickling in the other eye, I just have to come into hospital. So I used to sit and worry a lot about when I was going to lose the other one. So up until last week, I was even seeing a psychiatrist, a psychologist, to really keep my mind at ease, because I used to think a lot about it. What about if I lose my other eye? What's going to happen to me? But then I'm thinking, what about if it doesn't happen? So I'm thinking more positive than negative, that nothing happens. So I'm living my life as it is now, anything. My ambition, I would like to get into events. But my ambition too is, if I would love it, I would like to go back home to educate people about sickle cell, because most people are very ignorant about it. Yeah, and back home it's sort of a stigma. People think it's, I don't know how to put it, but here everyone knows it's related to the blood. But back home, it's like, oh, you're from this family and there's a curse, but it's not like that at all. So people need to know that it's something to do with your blood and nothing about a curse or anything like that.
My name's Whitney, I'm 22 years old. I found out that I had sickle cell. Well, it's something that I've always known. I was diagnosed with sickle cell at birth, so my parents knew as soon as I was born. The hospital that I was born in told them that I was suffering from sickle cell, and from that day forth, it was the condition I've always been aware of. And my mum and dad have made it quite clear what my condition is and what I need to do to try and keep it under control. My friends treated me, if I have to be honest, I had a mixed response. Some friends would find it interesting that I had something different and they'd ask me lots of questions, but at the same time I didn't always like that because I felt like I was something new and they just wanted to kind of know what made me sick, and I didn't want to be different, so them asking me loads of questions made me feel even more different, and I didn't really enjoy that. My friends can't catch sickle cell from me. Some of them have asked. I know that I one time met someone who said that his first kiss was with someone that suffered from sickle cell, and the first thing he did when he realised that she had sickle cell was to go home and try and find out if he had caught it, but that isn't true, and it's not contagious, it's hereditary, so you'd get it from your parents. There is somewhat an unawareness of what sickle cell is, so when I meet someone for the first time, sometimes they don't know what the disorder is, and if I say that it's a blood disorder, their first reaction is that it's contagious, and they are sometimes scared. A lot of curiosity to find out more about it and how it affects me. I've had mixed reviews. Some people respond quite positively and they'll always want to know if there's anything they can do to help, but that hasn't been the case, and sometimes I have had a negative response. One of the worst responses to my sickle cell I think I've ever encountered was where I was in hospital on one occasion and I was there with a sickle cell crisis, and I didn't tell my friends why I was there, and when I got out and I went back to school, there was rumours that I was dying, and that when they realised I had sickle cell, they said, I don't know why you bothered to come back to school because you're just going to die young anyway. So that was quite tough. I think it is quite common for young people to not always know what sickle cell is. I can't speak for perhaps what it's like now, because I was at school a little while ago now. So I'd like to hope that things have changed slightly. But I think there is definitely an ignorance to some extent of what the condition is and how it really affects you. My life ambition is to go to law school, finish law school and become a qualified solicitor. I'd like to qualify into medical health law, and outside of my career I'd like to help anyone suffering from sickle cell. It hasn't always been easy for me, so if I could possibly make it easier on anyone else that's also living with the condition and helping them to come to terms with their condition in the same way that I had to do, just with a little bit of extra support, that would be amazing.